Define cloud computing. In this section, we will formally define cloud computing. In the previous section, we saw how Joe, a pizza place owner, discovers cloud computing and the various aspects of cloud computing that are desirable for organizations. In this section, we will look at various definitions of cloud computing, including the NIST definition of the cloud. So what are the objectives? We will look at a brief history of cloud computing. Then we will look at the various definitions of cloud computing. You'll be surprised that some of the earlier definitions of cloud computing comes from the 1960s. Then we'll look at the NIST definition of cloud computing, and an important definition. And then we'll look at IT resources and how they are connected to the cloud model, virtualization and how it's connected to the cloud model, security and the cloud. Cloud computing is often compared to utility computing. John McCarthy, an American computer scientist who popularized the concept of time-sharing systems. If you recall, time-sharing systems are you take a computer and you chop it up into various computing and storage and RAM pieces so that multiple people or multiple programs can be running and using the system at the same time. Time-sharing systems. John McCarthy in 1961 made a statement that kind of resonates today as part of cloud computing. He said, if computers of the kind I have advocated become the computers of the future, then computing may someday be organized as a public utility, just as the telephone system is a public utility. The computer utility could become the basis of a new important industry. It is almost as if John McCarthy already envisioned the concept of cloud computing, the concept of today's utility computing as promised by the cloud. Another computer scientist, Leonard Kleinrock, chief scientist at ARPANET, which is the organization that seeded the internet, in 1969 said, as of now, computer networks are still in their infancy. But as they grow up and become sophisticated, we will probably see the spread of computer utilities. These great computer scientists in the 1960s actually saw a vision where computing will become a utility model. And that's really the founding principle behind cloud computing. Let's look at the revolution in the marketplace, the shift. What I have done here is I've taken the computing era, the 1950s all the way to the 2010s, and I've broken it down into three major time sections. In the 50s and the 60s, hardware was king. You had companies like IBM, HP, DEC, which were selling hardware, and so hardware was the big thing. And then something interesting happened in the 1970s. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, these guys started coming in and they started introducing this concept of personal computers. And so the personal computer industry became popular, and software now becomes king, because if you have personal computers, you need software. And so people start writing software, programmers start writing software, and programmers are becoming entrepreneurs, they're becoming millionaires. And so software becomes the king. But something interesting happened in the 1990s. With the introduction of the World Wide Web, things start shifting to the web. Now, services are becoming important. All the software that people use to write and bundle it and sell it to you as a CD or as a disk are now becoming available online as services. And data also starts becoming important. Now, for this particular class, for this discussion, what I would like to do is concentrate on the online software services. Let's look at the software or web services. Let's look at email. Nobody anymore buys hardware, installs email server, installs that email client, and then connects to the email server to send emails. We simply go online. There are these email services available. We just use them. Hotmail, Gmail, Yahoo, all these are different email services that are available. Similarly, if you want to publish, well, you can surely get your own hardware, get your own web server, install it, and then write your own HTML documents. or you could just use a service that's available online, a publishing service online like WordPress or Blogspot. Similarly, for social media, you don't really sit down and create your own websites and your own messaging mechanism. It's available. There's a platform available. So you use Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter to communicate with friends and relatives. Business services like the tax services, if you want to do your own taxes, it used to be that you would actually buy TurboTax, install it on your computer. Now you can simply go online and do your taxes online. CRM, which is customer relationship management. Salesforce.com is offering CRM service online. E-commerce. Now you can get online and buy whatever you want from Amazon.com or Walmart.com. So services are now moving online. You can almost think of all these services as software as a service, which is actually a service in cloud computing model. Talking about Amazon, an online retail store, an online retail giant where you simply, at the convenience of home, go online, order whatever you want, and a couple of days later, the package appears in your house. That's a pretty good model. It's a pretty instant model. Amazon had a pretty interesting idea. In 2003, Chris Pinkham and Benjamin Black presented a vision for Amazon's retail computing inside Amazon. All this is happening inside Amazon. Their idea was infrastructure inside Amazon. Infrastructure provisioning inside Amazon should be standardized. And they said that it should be completely automated and it should rely on extensively web services model through an API model. So they really wanted a model where the developers can say, I want 3 servers with 16 gigs of RAM, quad core, and 512 gigabytes of storage, and instantly it is available. That's the model that they wanted. In 2004, they actually present this idea to Jeff Bezos, who basically says, not a bad idea, it's pretty good. And so he likes the idea, and they go ahead and implement this particular model, which is called Amazon EC2. In 2006, Amazon releases Amazon Web Services under the subdomain aws.amazon.com, and so they became the first company that introduces to the world the idea of public cloud computing. Gartner, which is a company that does research on IT trends, look at the Amazon model, and they actually produce a paper on cloud computing. In 2008, in that paper, they say it's a style of computing in which scalable and elastic IT-enabled capabilities are delivered as a service to external companies or to external customers using internet technologies. There's a lot of terms that's important over here. Scalable, elastic, delivered as a service to external customers using internet technologies. Right? That's the definition of cloud computing that they give. And then in 2008, Forrester, which is another research company, also published their own paper on cloud computing, and they say a standardized IT capability, which includes services, software, or infrastructure, delivered via internet technologies in a pay-per-use, self-service way. The key things here are services, software, infrastructure, delivered via internet technologies, so over the web, over TCP/IP, in a pay-per-use, which is really pay-as-you-grow or pay-as-you-go model, and self-service provisioning. So they define cloud computing to be that. And both the definitions are good, but there is even a better definition that is from NIST. But before we get into the NIST definition, I want to talk about why the term cloud. Well, the cloud symbol, as you see on the right-hand side over here, originated as a metaphor for the internet. They represented the cloud as a metaphor for something that's out there, some other system, some other computing resources, some other networks to which they connect to. Now the symbol is being used to denote the boundary of a cloud environment. Now when we put the symbol out there, it's actually our services. It's actually our infrastructure. It's actually our routers that's actually running in the cloud. And so the term cloud became associated with cloud computing. The point I'm trying to make is the network cloud diagram became the foundation for the symbol cloud. So now let's look at NIST and its definition for cloud computing. NIST stands for National Institute for Standards and Technology. They are a measurement standards lab or organization. They are actually part of the United States Department of Commerce. Their official site is nist.gov. Their mission is to standardize, well, let's look at the official mission. It says promote US innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement science, standards, which is very important, and technology in a way that enhances economic security and improve our quality of life. When NIST saw that cloud computing is becoming important, they wanted to come up with a standard for cloud computing. And so NIST defines cloud computing. In a publication numbered 800-145, they actually define cloud computing. The paper is called The NIST Definition of Cloud Computing. It's a short paper. It's a 3 or 4 page paper. Let's go ahead and take a look at the paper. Here we are in the NIST 800-145 paper, the NIST Definition of Cloud Computing. It's written by Peter Mell and Timothy Grants. And if you scroll down further, you will see that they actually define cloud computing. So there's a paragraph over here, which I have put in the slide, which we will read, because it's really important for us to understand this definition. This is the most important definition out there in the marketplace. It's a complete definition. As part of this definition, they also talk about essential characteristics, the service models, and deployment models. We will look at each one of these things in various sections. Let's get back. Let's look at the definition of cloud computing by NIST. I'm going to read it to you verbatim, and then we'll look at some of these terms as we pick apart the definition. Cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources, example, networks, servers, storage, applications, and services that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or service provider interaction. This cloud model is composed of 5 essential characteristics, 3 service models, and 4 deployment models. So let's pick apart this definition. It says cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous meaning access from anywhere, convenient, I should be able to access it from my mobile phone, from my web browser, from my client desktop application. I should be able to access the shared pool of configurable computing resources. Now, what are these configurable computing resources? Networks, servers, storage, applications, and services. These different computing resources that are out there, I should be able to access it over the network, and I should be able to access it on demand. That can be rapidly provisioned. I should be able to say, I want to have a server. I want to be able to have storage, and I should be able to get it within a few minutes. And it should be done with minimal management effort. Not too much human interaction. In fact, no human interaction. Or even the service provider interaction. I shouldn't really have to interact with a human on the other side. This cloud model is composed of 5 essential characteristics. We'll study each one of the characteristics in a different section. 3 service models. We'll study the various service models that's out there. And 4 deployment models as part of cloud computing. Right? So that's the definition of cloud computing by NIST. Now let's look at that definition from a slightly different perspective. NIST basically says there are 3 service models: software as a service, also called SaaS, platform as a service called PaaS, and infrastructure as a service, IaaS. We have an entire section devoted to service models. In that section, we'll talk about each one of these services. In fact, there is also non-NIST service models. We'll look at those too. Then they talk about the essential characteristics. They talk about 5 essential characteristics. Here are the 5 essential characteristics. We will talk about this in a different section called Essential Characteristics of the Cloud. And then they also talk about some of the other common characteristics like massive scale, homogeneity, virtualization. We'll talk about all these different characteristics also in the section on characteristics. They also talk about the deployment models. They say that there are 4 deployment models, which are private, public, community, and hybrid models. We'll talk about this in the section on deployment models. But what I wanted to show you is that the NIST definition seems to be a fairly good definition that discusses or defines what cloud computing is. Well, NIST not only has the 800-145 paper, they also have a whole series of other paper that talks about security, that talks about the standards roadmap, that talks about the architecture, and even several draft documents. You might want to look into these documents as you become a cloud professional. And by the way, these documents are also available as links as part of your course webpage. Let's talk about IT resources. IT resources can be physical or they can be virtual. They can be hardware based, which means it's a physical server or a network device. They can be software based, which means it can be a virtual server or some kind of a custom software. What I'm showing you over here are IT resources, and I'm actually showing you the diagramming convention that I'll be using at different points in the various modules and the various sections throughout this particular course. So it could be a physical server, or it could be a virtual server, it could be a software program, it could be a service, it could be a storage device, or it could be a network device such as firewall. A cloud computing environment actually hosts these IT resources. Like I said, the cloud is used to represent the boundary of the cloud. And in this cloud environment, we have 3 virtual servers. We have 2 services, which are cloud services. And we have 3 storage devices. And that's what this particular cloud environment is all about. This is your infrastructure as a service. We'll talk more about infrastructure as a service later. The point I'm trying to make is here is a cloud computing environment that has these different IT resources. Let's talk about virtualization for a minute. Virtualization is the creation of a virtual rather than an actual physical version of something. It's all virtual. It could be virtualized operating system, a virtualized server, could be a virtualized storage device, or even a network resource like firewalls. Virtualization has become very important in cloud computing. In fact, virtualization enables cloud computing. Virtualization is not cloud computing. It enables cloud computing. When you say that you want to have a server that is 16 gigs of RAM and 8 core and 2 terabytes of storage, all those things are coming to you on demand through the virtualization technology. So virtualization technology is very important. It is an enabling technology for cloud computing. Virtualization technology is not cloud computing. There are 3 areas of IT where virtualization is making headways, and that is server virtualization, storage virtualization, and network virtualization. These are the 3 things that make up the IaaS. Virtualization is so important that we have an entire module devoted to virtualization, and then when virtualization meets cloud computing through IaaS, we have server IaaS, storage IaaS, and network IaaS. These are 3 different modules that we will be covering as we move through this particular course. All I want you to understand at this particular point is that virtualization is an enabling technology for cloud computing. It is not cloud computing. And we'll learn more about virtualization in the next module. Let's talk about security and cloud computing. Security is key to cloud's success. Security is an essential aspect of the cloud. It is so important that I have an entire module devoted to cloud security. At this point, I wanted to kind of give you a quick introduction to cloud security. When it comes to cloud security, it deals with many aspects. It talks about physical security, computer security, network security, application security, authentication, authorization and identity, information, and data security. All these things are part of cloud security, and they all have to be addressed by cloud security. We have an entire module devoted to cloud security. We'll talk in great detail in that module. But it's important to note that when it comes to security, the security issues actually fall into two broad categories. It's the security issues that are faced by cloud providers. We haven't gotten into who a cloud provider is. At this point, all you need to know is that a cloud provider is somebody that is providing a cloud service, such as Amazon.com or the Google cloud provider. They have certain responsibilities when it comes to security in the cloud. But then there is also some security issues that are faced by cloud consumers. So you as a cloud consumer that is using a cloud service also have some responsibilities. And that is also something that needs to be understood. So we'll talk about all these things in the section on cloud security. In summary, cloud computing had its vision set in the 1960s. Even though cloud computing seems like it's something that started 4 or 5 years ago, it's been around. The idea has been around for a while. And the most important idea is the vision of computing as a utility model. And that's where we are really moving towards when it comes to cloud computing. Amazon was the first company that set the first concrete implementation in the cloud, called the Amazon Web Services. NIST definition of cloud computing is probably one of the most important definitions of cloud computing. And in their definition, they define 3 service models: IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. They define 4 deployment models: private, public, community, and hybrid models. And then they describe 5 essential characteristics for the cloud: on-demand service, broad network access, resource pooling, rapid elasticity, and measured service. Don't worry too much about it. As we go through this particular module, through the various sections, you will be able to understand these things in great detail. At this particular point, all I want you to understand is that the NIST definition of cloud computing is a very vital definition, and that is what we will be following. Also, virtualization is a key enabler for cloud success. Virtualization is really not cloud computing, it's an enabling technology. Security is another critical aspect of cloud. Without security, cloud will not be successful. Again, we'll talk about cloud security in great detail later on. Similarly, we'll talk about virtualization in great detail later on.